My name is Teresa. I'm 32 years old and I've always been the reliable one in my family. When I volunteered to drive everyone to our luxury Maui resort, I was excited for our first vacation together in years. Then my brother Adam smirked and announced, "Remember everyone? Teresa's just the driver." And they all laughed. It hurt, but I smiled through it. Little did I know that comment was just the beginning. At check-in, I discovered they'd only booked one room for 4 people. My parents, brother, and his wife. I wasn't included. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button to find out what happened next when I made one phone call that changed everything while they stood watching in the hotel lobby. I've always been the middle child caught between my older brother, Adam, who's 34, and my younger sister, Bella, who's 28. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I learned early that being reliable meant being invisible. While my siblings soaked up attention and praise, I built a life of quiet accomplishment. My career in marketing took off after college. I moved to Seattle 7 years ago and worked my way up to executive level at one of the city's top firms. The journey wasn't easy. I sacrificed weekends, relationships, and sleep to prove myself. Last year, I landed the Henderson account, a 7-figure deal that earned me a substantial bonus and respect throughout the industry. My apartment overlooks Puget Sound and I've created a life I'm proud of, even if my family rarely acknowledges it. Adam, on the other hand, followed in our father's footsteps, joining the family construction business. He married Sophia 5 years ago, and they've been the golden couple ever since. My parents talk about them constantly, their house renovation, their vacation plans, their future children. Adam has always had a way of making everything about him with comments that seem innocent but cut deep. "Teresa's so busy with work, she probably doesn't have time for a relationship," he'd say at family gatherings. Or, "Good thing Teresa's coming to dinner. We needed someone to take photos for social media." Small digs that everyone laughs off while I smile politely. Bella, the baby of the family, became an elementary school teacher in our hometown. She lives just 20 minutes from our parents and sees them weekly. She's not deliberately unkind like Adam, but she's always followed his lead, laughing at his jokes at my expense. My parents, Thomas and Catherine, have always been proud of all their children in different ways, but there's a clear hierarchy. They call Adam for advice, Bella for emotional support, and me for practical matters, technology help, travel planning or financial questions. I'm their Google and their secretary rolled into one. When the idea of a family vacation came up during Thanksgiving last year, I was surprised to be included. It had been years since we'd all traveled together, and I secretly hoped this might be a chance to strengthen our bonds. My mother mentioned wanting to go somewhere tropical, and I suggested Hawaii. Before I knew it, I was researching resorts, comparing flight prices, and creating a shared document with options. "You're so good at organizing these things, Teresa," my mother said. "We'd be lost without you." I took that small compliment and ran with it, spending hours finding the perfect resort in Maui with activities everyone would enjoy. I scheduled video calls to discuss details, created a budget spreadsheet, and even put together a packing guide. I wanted everything to be perfect. Maybe then they'd see me differently. When I presented the final plan in January, everyone seemed genuinely excited. I'd found a beautiful resort with multiple pools, beachfront access, and several restaurants. My parents agreed to cover the accommodations as a gift to their children. While we would each pay for our flights and activities, I took 3 days off work, precious vacation time I'd been saving for a photography course I wanted to take. I postponed a potential date with a colleague who'd been flirting with me for months. I even rescheduled a dental appointment I'd had waited 2 months to get. This trip was my priority. In the weeks leading up to our departure, I handled all the confirmations, printed everyone's boarding passes, and created a detailed itinerary. I was so caught up in the logistics that I missed the warning signs. The way my parents vaguely answered questions about room arrangements, how Adam and Sophia seemed to be planning activities without including me, and the lack of response when I shared ideas for group outings. I told myself it was just everyone being busy with their own lives. This trip would be different. Finally, we'd have quality time together as a family, and maybe they'd see the successful, capable woman I'd become, not just the reliable middle child they could take for granted. If only I'd known what was waiting for me in that hotel lobby in Maui. Our journey began at O'Hare International Airport on a bright Tuesday morning in May. I arrived an hour before our agreed meeting. Time to scope out the check-in area and find the best coffee shop for my caffeine-dependent family. When they arrived right on time for once, I waved them over to the airline counter where I'd already spoken to the staff about seating us together. "Teresa's already got everything figured out," my father said to the check-in agent with a laugh. "She's our personal travel agent." I smiled, though the comment stung slightly. I wasn't their travel agent. I was their daughter and sister who wanted this vacation to be special. While we waited to board, I distributed everyone's tickets, passports, and a small folder containing printed confirmations, local recommendations, and emergency contacts. Adam glanced at his and dropped it into his carry-on without a word. Sophia at least thanked me. "This must have taken forever to put together," she said quietly while the others were getting coffee. "It wasn't a big deal," I replied, though it had taken hours of my evenings after long work days. "I just want everyone to have a great time." Sophia gave me a look I couldn't quite read before Adam called her over to see something on his phone. The flight to Honolulu was long but uneventful. I'd managed to book us in the same row with my parents on one side of the aisle and Adam, Sophia, and me on the other. I took the window seat, hoping to catch some sleep against the wall of the plane, but ended up helping my mother connect to the in-flight Wi-Fi, finding my father's reading glasses in his carry-on, and getting up 4 times so Adam could use the bathroom. When the meal service came, I discovered they'd run out of the chicken option by the time they reached me. "You should have ordered special meals ahead of time," Adam commented as he cut into his chicken. "You're usually on top of those details." I bit my tongue and ate the pasta option without complaint, even though I'm lactose intolerant and knew I'd pay for it later. It wasn't worth mentioning. After a brief layover in Honolulu, we boarded our final flight to Maui. The tension in my shoulders began to ease as I caught my first glimpse of the island from the air. Lush green mountains cascading down to beaches rimmed with turquoise water. This paradise was exactly what I needed after months of stress and planning. At the Maui airport, I headed straight to the rental car counter while my family collected their luggage. I'd reserved a spacious SUV with my credit card as I had the best credit score and a loyalty program with the company that saved us nearly $100. When I returned with the keys, everyone was waiting with their bags, looking tired but excited. I got us upgraded to a Cadillac Escalade. I announced more legroom for everyone. "Nice work, sis," Bella said. The first genuine compliment I'd received all day. As we drove away from the airport, the humid tropical air blowing through the open windows, I felt a moment of genuine joy. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Palm trees swayed against the backdrop of volcanic mountains. And for a brief moment, we were just a family on vacation with all our baggage left behind on the mainland. That feeling lasted approximately 20 minutes. "Can you turn up the AC? It's roasting back here," Adam called from the third row where he and Sophia Saturday. My parents had claimed the middle row, leaving me alone up front. I adjusted the climate controls. "Is that better?" "Now it's too cold," my mother complained. Adjusted. "The music's too loud," my father said. I lowered the volume on the Hawaiian station I'd found. "Actually, can we listen to something else?" "This is putting me to sleep," Adam chimed in. For the next 45 minutes, I navigated unfamiliar roads while serving as climate control technician, DJ, navigator, and tour guide, pointing out scenic views that no one seemed interested in. My carefully planned music playlist went unheard as Adam connected his phone to the Bluetooth and played his own selections. As we neared the resort area of Wia, the roads became more congested with tourists and locals alike. I concentrated on following the GPS directions while trying to absorb the beauty around us. Luxury shops and restaurants intermixed with glimpses of stunning beaches and perfectly landscaped resorts. "You missed that turn," my father pointed out, though I was following the GPS exactly. "The app is taking us the scenic route," I explained. "It avoids some of the traffic." "Well, your scenic route is making me carrick," Bella complained from the middle row. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and reminded myself we were all tired from travel. Things would improve once we reached the resort, showered, and had a good meal. This was just the travel stress talking. As we finally approached the grand entrance of the Royal Wai'a Resort, I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. The property was even more beautiful than the photos online. A sprawling Polynesian-inspired paradise with flowing waterfalls, torchlit pathways, and the ocean stretching endlessly beyond. That's when Adam decided to drop his bomb. "Remember everyone," he announced loudly as I carefully navigated the circular driveway. "Teresa's just the driver." And everyone laughed. The majestic Royal Wai'a Resort loomed ahead of us, its grand porte cochere, illuminated by flickering tiki torches and soft landscape lighting that highlighted swaying palm trees. Hawaiian music drifted through the open-air lobby and staff in crisp uniforms waited to greet arriving guests. It should have been a magical moment, the culmination of months of planning and anticipation. Instead, I sat frozen behind the wheel, my brother's words and my family's laughter ringing in my ears. "Teresa's just the driver." For simple words that revealed everything about my place in this family. Not a daughter, not a sister, but a service provider. Someone to handle logistics to ferry them from point A to point B. Both literally and figuratively. The chauffeur of their vacation experience. I pulled up to the valet station with practiced precision. My customer service smile firmly in place despite the ache spreading through my chest. A young Hawaiian man in a resort uniform approached my window. "Aloha and welcome to the Royal Wai'a, checking in today." "Yes, reservation under Lambert," I replied using my parents' last name as instructed. I'd kept my maiden name professionally, but for family matters, we defaulted to my parents' surname. While the valet and bellhop began unloading our luggage, my family spilled out of the SUV like excited children, stretching and exclaiming over the beauty of the resort. No one thanked me for the drive. No one asked if I was tired after navigating unfamiliar roads while catering to their every need. "The air smells like flowers," my mother said, inhaling deeply. "Check out that infinity pool." Adam pointed toward the multi-level aquatic paradise visible beyond the lobby. I handed the keys to the valet along with a tip from my own wallet, then retrieved my suitcase before the bellhop could add it to his cart. Something told me to keep my belongings separate. A premonition I couldn't explain. The lobby was stunning. Soaring ceilings with exposed wooden beams, enormous arrangements of tropical flowers, and a wall of windows showcasing the resort's private beach and the Pacific Ocean beyond. Under different circumstances, I would have been taking photos mentally, noting design elements to incorporate into future marketing campaigns. Instead, I felt like I was moving underwater, everything slightly distorted by the hurt still rippling through me. Teresa stopped daydreaming. "And come on," Bella called, already halfway to the reception desk with the others. I followed, wheeling my suitcase across the polished marble floor. The cool air conditioning raised goosebumps on my arms, or perhaps it was the growing sense that something wasn't right. My family had clustered together at the check-in desk, their voices low but animated. The receptionist, a woman with a name tag reading Leilani, kept glancing between her computer screen and our group with a slight furrow in her brow. I hung back observing. My mother was doing most of the talking with my father, occasionally nodding or adding comments. Adam stood with his arm around Sophia, looking impatient. Bella was already distracted by her phone, probably posting arrival photos to social media. After a moment, Leilani looked up and made eye contact with me, then said something to my mother that caused her to turn and gesture for me to join them. I approached slowly, the wheels of my suitcase suddenly loud against the floor. "Teresa, dear, can you give Leilani your ID as well? She needs to add you to the room access list," my mother said, her voice slightly higher than normal. I reached for my wallet, relieved. So, I was included after all. The driver comment had been just another of Adam's thoughtless jokes, nothing more. Leilani smiled professionally as she took my driver's license. "And which room will you be in, Miss Lambert?" "We have the Lambert party booked in our Ocean View suite," but she glanced at her screen again. "That accommodation is designed for a maximum of 4 adults. The silence that followed was brief but deafening. My father cleared his throat. "We thought Teresa would be getting her own room. She usually prefers her privacy." I stared at him uncomprehending. "My own room? That wasn't what we discussed." I turned to my mother seeking clarification. "I thought we were all staying together in the family suite." "That's what you said when I sent the booking options." My mother's smile was strained. "Well, yes, but when we looked at the final cost, it made more sense to book the 4-person suite. We assumed you'd prefer your own space anyway since you're so independent." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This hadn't been a misunderstanding or an oversight. They had deliberately booked accommodations that excluded me, all while having me plan the entire trip. I wasn't just the driver. I wasn't even a proper guest in their minds. Leilani, clearly sensing the tension, spoke up diplomatically. "We do have other rooms available if needed, though they would be at a different rate than what was included in your package deal." "How much?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. She quoted a price that made my father wheeze. Nearly $500 per night for the most basic room, as it was peak season and they were nearly at capacity. "That's ridiculous," Adam interjected. "Teresa, can't you just book something more reasonable at another hotel? There must be cheaper options down the beach." And there it was, the final confirmation that I had never been part of their vacation plans. Just the unpaid travel agent who happened to share their DNA. The realization should have crushed me. But instead a strange calm settled over me. It was almost liberating to have the truth laid bare after years of subtle exclusion and casual dismissal. Sophia, to her credit, looked mortified. "We could split the cost of Teresa's room," she suggested, nudging Adam. He scoffed. "Why? She makes plenty of money with that fancy job of hers, more than we do." My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, but said nothing in my defense. Bella was suddenly very interested in a tropical arrangement on the counter. Leilani's professional smile remained intact, but her eyes conveyed sympathy. She'd clearly witnessed family dramas unfold in this lobby before, but perhaps none quite as quietly devastating as this one. I took a deep breath, feeling oddly detached now, as if watching the scene unfold from a distance. All those years of seeking approval, of organizing family events, of being the reliable one they could count on, but never actually see. All those years of telling myself that blood was thicker than water, that family meant something sacred. In that moment, standing in that beautiful lobby with the scent of plumeria in the air and Hawaiian music playing softly in the background, I finally asked myself a question that was long overdue. What did I owe these people who had never prioritized me? The answer when it came was both terrifying and exhilarating. Nothing. I owed them absolutely nothing. The weight of realization pressed down on me like the humid Hawaiian air outside. My family hadn't simply forgotten to include me in the room arrangements. They had deliberately planned it this way all along. Every vague response to my questions about accommodations, every deflection when I asked about sleeping arrangements, it all made sense now. They had used me for my organizational skills, my attention to detail, my willingness to handle all the stressful parts of vacation planning, and then expected me to fade into the background once the actual enjoyment began. I don't understand, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. We've been planning this trip for 6 months. Why wouldn't you mention this room situation before we flew 5,000 miles from home? My mother fidgeted with her purse strap, a telltale sign of her discomfort. We didn't think it would be such a big deal, sweetheart. You've always been so independent. Independent doesn't mean I want to be excluded, I replied. It certainly doesn't mean I want to be surprised with a $500 per night room charge after planning an entire family vacation. A middle-aged couple waiting behind us shifted awkwardly, pretending not to listen. Leilani maintained her professional demeanor, but I caught her slight nod of agreement with my words. You're overreacting, Adam said with that dismissive tone he'd perfected since childhood. It's not like we told you that you couldn't come on the trip at all. No, you just made me the unpaid travel agent and chauffeur, I replied. The calm in my voice surprised even me. This wasn't the hurt little sister speaking. This was the marketing executive who had learned to hold her own in boardrooms full of men trying to talk over her. Can you lower your voice? My father interjected, glancing around. People are staring. Let them, I said. I'm curious what they'd think about parents who have their daughter plan an entire Hawaiian vacation and then inform her upon arrival that she wasn't actually included in the accommodations. Bella finally looked up from her phone. Teresa, come on. It's not that serious. You can just book your own room. With what budget? I've already spent thousands on flights, the rental car in my name, and preparation for this trip. Unlike some people, I don't have mom and dad covering all my expenses. That comment hit a nerve. Bella's face flushed. That's not fair. I work hard for my money, and I don't. I took time off from a job where every day away cost me potential clients and opportunities. I rescheduled appointments, pushed back deadlines, and spent countless hours making this perfect for everyone. And your response is that I'm just the driver who can go find her own accommodations. My mother placed a hand on my arm. Teresa, please, we'll figure something out. Maybe we can add a rollaway bed to the suite. The suggestion was so absurd, I almost laughed. A rollaway bed like a child at a sleepover while everyone else had proper sleeping arrangements in a suite I had researched and helped select. I closed my eyes briefly, memories flooding back with painful clarity. My 10th birthday party, where my mother forgot to order enough cake, and I gave my slice to Bella, who was crying. My high school graduation, where my parents spent most of the ceremony talking about Adam's new job rather than my scholarships. Last Christmas, when my carefully selected gifts for everyone were met with polite thanks, while Adam's last-minute gift cards received ossive praise. A lifetime of being overlooked, of being valued for what I could do rather than who I was. A lifetime of telling myself it would get better, that one day they would see me. But standing in that luxury hotel lobby, the truth finally crystallized. They would never see me as equal to my siblings. I would always be the reliable one. The one who could be counted on to help, but not necessarily included when it came time to celebrate or relax. The one who drove the car, but wasn't guaranteed a place at the destination. Sophia broke the uncomfortable silence. Why don't we all take a moment to calm down? We've been traveling all day. Everyone's tired. Let's check in, get settled, and discuss this over dinner. A reasonable suggestion from perhaps the only reasonable person present. But it was too late for reason. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. A tectonic movement of self-respect that had been building pressure for 3 decades. Leilani, who had been professionally pretending not to listen, spoke up gently. If I may suggest, we do have a lovely single-bedroom garden view villa that's become available due to a last-minute cancellation. It's slightly below our standard rate, and while it's not part of your family's package, I could apply a modest discount given the circumstances. She turned her monitor so I could see the room. A beautiful private bungalow set among tropical gardens with its own small plunge pool and a separate entrance from the main resort. It was stunning, and under different circumstances would have been a dream accommodation. That's perfect, my father said quickly, reaching for his wallet. We'll take it for Teresa. No, I said, surprising myself again. No, you won't. Don't be difficult, Adam. Dad's offering to pay for your room. Problem solved. I shook my head slowly. The problem isn't the room or who pays for it. The problem is that none of you thought I deserved to be part of this conversation until we were standing here. The problem is that you've spent my entire life treating me like an afterthought, and I've spent my entire life accepting it. My mother's eyes widened. Teresa, that's not true. We love you very much. I know you do in your way, I acknowledged. But loving someone and respecting them are different things. And right now, I need to respect myself enough to walk away from people who don't see my worth. The lobby seemed to go quiet around us, though logically I knew that was impossible. In a busy resort, my family stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to annoyance to, in Sophia's case, something that looked almost like admiration. So, what are you saying? My father asked, his voice unnaturally loud in the tense atmosphere. You're going to ruin the entire vacation over a misunderstanding about rooms. It's not a misunderstanding when it's deliberate, I replied calmly. And I'm not ruining anything. I'm choosing not to participate in something where I'm not genuinely wanted. Of course, you're wanted, my mother insisted, though her eyes didn't quite meet mine. We're a family. Family, I said, the word tasting strange on my tongue. Shouldn't need a last-minute reminder to include everyone. Family shouldn't laugh when one member is reduced to just the driver. The conviction in my voice must have finally penetrated because no one immediately contradicted me. Even Adam looked somewhat uncomfortable, though. Whether from genuine regret or mere embarrassment at the public nature of this confrontation, I couldn't tell. I turned to Leilani, who had witnessed this entire family drama with professional composure. Thank you for your help, but I won't be needing a room after all. Are you sure? She asked quietly. The villa is quite private if you'd like some space from. Her eyes flickered briefly toward my family. I'm sure I set a plan already forming in my mind. I reached for my phone, scrolling through contacts until I found the one I needed. If you'll excuse me, I need to make a call. I stepped away from the check-in desk, feeling 5 pairs of eyes boring into my back as I walked toward the lobby's open doors, seeking privacy and fresh air. With each step, the weight on my shoulders seemed to lighten incrementally, as if I were shedding years of unmet expectations and unspoken resentments. Outside the evening, air was perfumed with tropical flowers and sea salt. The resort's torches cast golden light across the immaculate grounds, and somewhere nearby waves were breaking against the shore. It was paradise by any objective measure, and I was about to walk away from it. But sometimes walking away is the only way to find your true destination. I stepped out onto the resort's sweeping entrance pavilion, moving away from the flow of arriving guests to find a quiet corner near a bubbling fountain. The night air wrapped around me like a warm embrace, heavy with the scent of plumeria and salt. In the distance, I could hear the rhythmic crashing of waves against the shore. Nature's constant reminder that everything changes, everything flows, nothing remains static. With trembling fingers, I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Jamie Sullivan. We had met 3 years ago at a marketing conference in San Diego and had kept in touch professionally and personally ever since. When I mentioned my upcoming family trip to Maui, she had excitedly told me about her recent acquisition, a small boutique hotel on the island's less developed North Shore. If you need anything while you're there, anything at all, you call me, she had insisted. I never thought I'd be taking her up on that offer quite like this. The phone rang 3 times before Jamie's familiar voice answered, bright with surprise. Teresa, don't tell me you're on the island already. I am, I replied, my voice cracking slightly. Just landed a few hours ago. Jamie, ever perceptive, immediately caught the tremor in my words. What's wrong? You sound upset. I gave her the condensed version of events. The planning, the exclusion, the revelation in the lobby. As I spoke, the hurt transformed into something else. Clarity perhaps, or resolve. Those absolute jerks, Jamie said when I finished. Her indignation on my behalf was oddly comforting. Where are you now? Still at the Royal Way. Leah in the lobby. Yes, they're checking in. And I paused, realizing I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing. Standing outside a resort, I wasn't welcome to sleep in with a rental car in my name that my family expected to use on an island thousands of miles from home. The absurdity of the situation almost made me laugh. Listen to me, Jamie said firmly. The Hail Kaimaluya has its best suite sitting empty tonight. Ocean View Private lie the works. It's yours for as long as you want it. No arguments. Tang Yamia. I can't just yes, you absolutely can. I'm texting you the address right now. It's about 40 minutes from where you are. Use your rental car to drive here and we'll figure everything else out once you arrive. The car is in my name, I said, thinking aloud. But they're expecting to use it all week. Let me get this straight, Jamie said slowly. They excluded you from the room, made you the designated driver, and still expect to have access to the car that's in your name and on your credit card. Teresa, honey, I love you, but when did you become a doormat? The question stung, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. When had I become a doormat? Perhaps I always had been so eager for approval and inclusion that I'd accepted whatever scraps of affection my family offered. But not anymore. You're right, I said. Newfound determination, strengthening my voice. I'm on my way. Text me the address. Already done. Drive safely and call me if you need directions. I'll be waiting. I ended the call and stood for a moment, letting the night air fill my lungs. For the first time since arriving in Hawaii, I felt like I could breathe properly. The decision was made. I was choosing myself, my dignity, my self-respect over the familiar pattern of accommodation and disappointment. With squared shoulders, I walked back into the lobby. My family was still at the check-in desk, my father signing paperwork, while my mother chatted with Bella. Adam and Sophia stood slightly apart, looking at something on Adam's phone. None of them noticed me approach until I was standing right beside them. I've made arrangements, I announced calmly. I won't be staying here. My mother's face fell. Teresa, don't be dramatic. Your father's already paying for that garden villa. I've declined it, I replied. And I'll need the car keys from the valet. I'm leaving. Leaving? My father looked up from the paperwork, frowning. Leaving to go where? A friend owns a hotel on the North Shore. She's offered me a suite. Adam scoffed. And how are we supposed to get around the island without a car? I met his gaze steadily. That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. His eyes widened at my uncharacteristic response. The rental is for all of us. We agreed to split the cost. Actually, no. The rental is in my name on my credit card. I agreed to drive everyone around as a favor, which was apparently a mistake since I'm just the driver. But now I'm off duty. Bella stepped forward, her expression caught between annoyance and concern. You can't just leave us stranded, Teresa. That's not fair. Fair? The word tasted bitter on my tongue. Was it fair to have me plan this entire trip and then exclude me from the accommodations? Was it fair to laugh at Adam's joke, reducing me to staff rather than family? Please tell me more about what's fair. My mother placed a hand on my arm. Sweetheart, you're overreacting. We can work this out. I gently removed her hand. I'm not overreacting. For possibly the first time in my life, I'm reacting appropriately to being devalued and dismissed. You can easily rent another car tomorrow morning. The resort has a concierge who can arrange it. Or you can call a ride service, or you can book excursions through the hotel that include transportation. There are plenty of options that don't involve me sacrificing my self-respect. My father, always practical, shifted to problem-solving mode. How far is this other hotel? Perhaps we could all move there if they have room. The suggestion was so unexpected that it momentarily threw me off balance. Was this genuine concern for keeping the family together? Or just worry about losing their designated driver and organizer? They don't have room for everyone, I lied smoothly. And frankly, I need some space right now. Sophia, who had been quiet throughout this exchange, finally spoke up. I think we should respect Teresa's decision. We can figure out the transportation situation. She gave Adam a pointed look. We're adults. We can handle it. Adam's jaw tightened, but he didn't contradict his wife. Instead, he said, fine, go cool off if that's what you need. Just don't expect us to rearrange our plans when you change your mind tomorrow. I won't be changing my mind, I said with a certainty that surprised even me. I approached the valet desk and requested my car, handing over my ticket and ID. While we waited for the vehicle to be brought around, silence fell over our group. The uncomfortable silence of a family confronting a dynamic that had gone unchallenged for too long. My mother made one more attempt. At least join us for dinner tomorrow. We can talk things through when everyone's rested. I considered this, weighing my desire for complete separation against the possibility of a genuine reconciliation. I'll think about it, I finally said, non-committal but not entirely closed off. The valet pulled up with the SUV, its black exterior gleaming under the resort's atmospheric lighting. I thanked him and handed him another tip, then turned to face my family one last time. I hope you all enjoy your vacation, I said sincerely. I'll be enjoying mine, too, just separately. With that, I got into the driver's seat, adjusted the mirrors, and pulled away from the Royal Waya Resort, watching in the rearview mirror as my family stood in the driveway, their figures growing smaller until they disappeared entirely. As I navigated away from the resort area toward the highway that would take me to the North Shore, an unexpected sensation bubbled up inside me. It wasn't anger or hurt or even vindication. It was something lighter, freer. It was relief. For the first time in my adult life, I had set a boundary with my family and held it despite pressure and guilt and the weight of decades of established patterns. The road ahead was literally and figuratively unknown. But as I drove into the Hawaiian night with the windows down and the warm air rushing past, I felt more excitement than fear. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with the decision to drive away. The drive to the north shore of Maui was therapeutic. As I left behind the manicured resort area of Wai'a, the landscape gradually transformed. The road hugged the coastline, offering breathtaking views of moonlit waves crashing against lava rock formations. I drove with the windows down, letting the salt-laden air whip through my hair, washing away the hurt and confusion of the past few hours. My navigation system guided me along the famous road to Hana. Though I was only traveling part of the route. Even in the darkness, I could sense the wild beauty of this less developed part of the island. Dense jungle vegetation on one side, vast ocean on the other. Occasional small towns appeared and disappeared, their lights twinkling briefly before I was enveloped in darkness again. By the time I reached the turnoff for Haile Kaimaloia, I felt like a different person than the one who had arrived in Maui just hours before. The weight of familial expectations had lifted, replaced by a strange, giddy sense of possibility. I followed a narrow, winding driveway, illuminated by solar-powered path lights. When it opened up to reveal the boutique hotel, I gasped audibly. Unlike the grandiose scale of the Royal Wai'a, Jamie's property was intimate and charming. A collection of elegant bungalows arranged around a central two-story building, all nestled between towering palm trees with ocean visible beyond. Before I could even park the car, the front door of the main building opened, and Jamie rushed out, her curly hair bouncing with each step. She wore a casual floral dress and no shoes, looking every bit the relaxed island hotel owner she had become. "You made it," she exclaimed, pulling me into a fierce hug the moment I stepped out of the car. I was starting to worry. "I took the scenic route," I explained, returning her embrace. "I needed the time to think." Jamie stepped back, her hands still on my shoulders as she examined my face. "How are you really doing? And don't give me the polite answer." I considered the question seriously. "I'm surprisingly okay. Hurt, yes. Angry, definitely, but also I'm relieved. Like, I've finally put down a heavy suitcase I've been carrying for years." She nodded approvingly. "Good. Now, come in and see your home for the next week." "Jamie, I can't stay the whole week for free. That's too much." She waved away my protest. "Who said anything about free? You're going to work for your Keep marketing genius. I've been wanting professional photos and copy for my website. Consider this a trade." The arrangement made me feel better. I'd never been comfortable accepting charity, even from friends. "Deal?" Jamie helped me with my suitcase, leading me not to the main building, but to a standalone bungalow set slightly apart from the others. She opened the door with a flourish, revealing a space so beautiful it momentarily took my breath away. The suite was open and airy with polished hardwood floors and a king-sized bed draped in crisp white linens. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto a private lanai with an unobstructed view of the ocean. A small plunge pool glimmered in the moonlight and I could hear the waves crashing on the beach below. "Jamie, this is incredible," I whispered, taking it all in. "Only the best for my rescue mission," she replied with a wink. "Bathroom's through there. It has a soaking tub with the same view. Kitchenette stocked with basics. Oh, and I took the liberty of leaving something for you on the counter." That something turned out to be a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket alongside a platter of tropical fruits, local cheeses, and dark chocolate. "I figured you might not feel like socializing tonight," Jamie explained. "But if you change your mind, a few friends and I are having a small get-together at the main house in about an hour. Very casual, very low-key. Come." If you want no pressure. After she left, I stepped onto the lie and sank into a comfortable chair, listening to the rhythm of the waves. My phone, which I'd silenced during the drive, buzzed with accumulated notifications. 3 missed calls and 5 text messages from my mother. 2 texts from Bella and 1 from Sophia. Nothing from my father or Adam. I hesitated, then put the phone on. Do not disturb without reading any of the messages. They could wait. This moment, this beautiful, peaceful moment was for me alone. After a long shower that washed away the last traces of travel fatigue, I changed into a casual sundress I'd packed for beach dinners. Though part of me wanted to cocoon in the beautiful suite, the thought of spending the evening alone with my thoughts seemed suddenly unappealing. I made my way to the main house where the sound of soft music and laughter guided me to a spacious great room. Floor-to-ceiling windows were open to catch the sea breeze and twinkling string lights created a warm ambience. About a dozen people were scattered around the space. Some seated on comfortable-looking couches, others standing near a table laden with food and drinks. Jamie spotted me immediately and waved me over. "Everyone, this is my friend Teresa from Seattle. She's a marketing wizard and has agreed to help us update the hotel's branding." The group welcomed me warmly, making space in their circle without prying into why I had arrived unexpectedly. Jamie introduced me around, a mix of hotel staff, local business owners, and a few travelers who had somehow been absorbed into Jamie's social orbit. No one asked about my family or why I was staying alone. It was refreshing to be seen simply as Teresa, not as someone's daughter or sister or designated planner. As the evening progressed, I found myself engaged in a conversation with a tall bearded man named Daniel, who Jamie had introduced as the island's best tour guide. Unlike the carefully curated experiences I'd researched for my family, Daniel specialized in taking visitors to hidden spots only locals knew about. Secluded beaches, unmarked waterfalls, authentic eyries tucked away from tourist areas. "You should join one of my tours while you're here," he suggested, his smile reaching all the way to his eyes. "Small groups, no rush, and I promise sites you won't find in any guidebook." Under normal circumstances, I might have politely declined. I wasn't typically spontaneous, especially when traveling alone. But these weren't normal circumstances. And I was no longer the same Teresa who had boarded the plane in Chicago. "That sounds wonderful," I heard myself say. "When's your next tour?" "Tomorrow morning, if you're up for it. We leave at 7 to beat the crowds." I thought about my meticulously planned itinerary. Back at the Royal Way, Leia, the carefully scheduled activities, the restaurant reservations made months in advance, the coordinated transportation arrangements. None of that mattered anymore. 7 it is, I agreed. Later that night, back in my bungalow, with the sound of waves lulling me towards sleep, I finally checked my messages. Most were variations on the same theme: initial anger or hurt, followed by attempts at guilt-tripping, culminating in reluctant acceptance of my absence. My mother wanted to know where I was staying in case of emergency. Bella complained that they'd had to cancel their dinner reservation because it was too far to walk. Sophia's message was different. A simple apology for what had happened and a wish that I was enjoying wherever I had ended up. I responded only to Sophia, thanking her for her message and assuring her I was safe and well. To the others, I sent a group text. "I'm safe and staying with a friend. Enjoy your vacation. I'll be enjoying mine." Then I silenced my phone again, set an alarm for 6 a.m. and fell into the deepest sleep I'd had in months. The next morning dawned clear and perfect. I met Daniel and 3 other travelers, a retired couple from Canada and a solo female photographer from Australia for the promised tour. We piled into his open-air Jeep and set off on an adventure that couldn't have been more different from the structured experiences I'd planned for my family. Daniel took us to a black sand beach where we were the only people present. Taught us how to crack fresh coconuts with rocks. Showed us a hidden waterfall where we swam in the cool, clear pool beneath it, and introduced us to an elderly Hawaiian woman who served the best banana bread on the island from a tiny roadside stand. Throughout the day, my phone occasionally buzzed with messages from my family, updates about their activities, questions about when I might rejoin them, complaints about the rental car situation. With each notification, I felt a brief twinge of the old guilt and responsibility, but it was increasingly easy to set those feelings aside. By the 3rd day, the messages had dwindled to occasional check-ins from my mother. By the 5th day, they had almost stopped entirely. It seemed my family had adapted to my absence, just as I was adapting to my freedom. Those 7 days at Haile Kaimaluya transformed me. I spent mornings helping Jamie with her marketing materials, afternoons exploring with Daniel, who I had to admit was becoming more than just a tour guide in my affections, and evenings sharing meals and conversation with the ever-changing circle of interesting people in Jamie's orbit. I swam in the ocean at sunrise, learned to stand up, paddleboard, tasted fruits I couldn't name, and watched the sunset from a different beautiful spot each evening. I wore my hair natural and curly instead of straightening it as I always did at home. I left my watch in my suitcase and lived by the rhythms of hunger and fatigue rather than scheduled meal times and activities. In short, I discovered who Teresa could be when she wasn't constrained by others' expectations or her own habitual people-pleasing. On my last night in Maui, as I sat on my private lanai watching the stars reflected in the ocean, my phone rang. It was Sophia. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "I'm not calling to pressure you," she said immediately. "I just wanted to check that you're still flying home tomorrow." "Same flight as originally booked." I confirmed. "You?" "The same." She paused. "Teresa, I want you to know that I think you did the right thing. What happened wasn't okay and I should have said something sooner." Her words loosened something tight in my chest. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." "Would you?" She hesitated. "Would you be willing to have coffee with me when we're back home? Just the 2 of us." I considered this. Sophia had always been kind to me, if sometimes passively complicit in Adam's behavior. Unlike the others, she had recognized the wrongness of the situation immediately. "I'd like that," I said honestly. After we hung up, I returned to stargazing, contemplating the journey ahead. Not just the physical return to Seattle, but the emotional journey of establishing new boundaries with my family. It wouldn't be easy. Decades of established dynamics rarely change overnight. But as I sat there wrapped in the warm Hawaiian night, with the scent of plumeria in the air and the sound of waves breaking on the shore below, I knew with absolute certainty that I would never go back to being just the driver again. Sometimes you have to drive away to find your way home to yourself. 1 week after returning to Seattle, I sat in my favorite coffee shop near Pike Place Market, watching raindrops race down the window while waiting for Sophia. The Hawaiian tan still lingered on my skin, a physical reminder of the transformation that had occurred within me during those 7 unexpected days of freedom. My return flight had been uneventful. I'd chosen a seat far from my family's assigned row, though Sophia had spotted me during boarding and offered a small wave. We'd all collected our luggage in silence at Seattle-Tacoma International, and I'd taken a ride-share home while they piled into my father's waiting car. No one had asked about my week. No one had shared stories from theirs. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it was necessary. A buffer zone while we all processed what had happened. The coffee shop door opened, bringing a gust of cool air and Sophia shaking raindrops from her umbrella. She spotted me immediately and made her way over, looking nervous but determined. "I ordered you a vanilla latte," I said as she sat down. "Still your favorite, right?" She looked surprised that I remembered. "Yes, thank you." We engaged in small talk for a few minutes, discussing the weather, her work at the local gallery, my latest marketing campaign. Eventually though, we could no longer avoid the elephant in the room. "Adam's furious with you," she said, finally cupping her hands around her mug. I nodded unsurprised. "I expected as much. Your parents are hurt and confused. They don't understand why you overreacted." She made air quotes with her fingers. "Also expected," I replied calmly. "And Bella, mostly worried about Thanksgiving. She thinks it's going to be awkward." I couldn't help the small laugh that escaped me. "Of course, that's her concern." Sophia hesitated, then reached across the table to touch my hand lightly. "For what it's worth, I think what they did was wrong. What we all did, really. I should have spoken up sooner." "Why didn't you?" I asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. She sighed, looking down at her coffee. "It's complicated. Adam can be difficult when challenged. And I've always felt like an outsider in your family, too, in a different way. The daughter-in-law who's never quite good enough for their golden boy." This was a perspective I hadn't considered, that Sophia might have her own struggles with the Lambert family dynamics. "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "I should have noticed." She shrugged. "We all have our blind spots, but Teresa, what you did in Hawaii, standing up for yourself like that, it was brave. And honestly, it's made me rethink some things in my own relationship with Adam." The conversation shifted, then becoming deeper and more honest than any we'd had before. For nearly 2 hours, we talked about family dynamics, about setting boundaries, about the difference between keeping the peace and erasing oneself. By the time we left the coffee shop, something had shifted between us. Not quite friendship yet, but a mutual respect and understanding that hadn't existed before. That conversation with Sophia was the first step in my new approach to family relationships, but far from the last. The following week, I invited my parents to dinner at a neutral restaurant. The atmosphere was tense initially, with my mother trying too hard to pretend nothing had happened and my father retreating into uncomfortable silence. "I want to talk about Hawaii," I said directly after our appetizers arrived. My mother fidgeted with her napkin. "I don't see why we need to dwell on unpleasantness, Teresa. It was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I replied firmly. "It was a pattern that's existed my entire life, and I'm not willing to participate in it anymore." "What pattern?" my father asked, his tone defensive. "We've always treated all our children equally." Rather than argue this demonstrably false point, I took a different approach. "Dad, can you name the account I landed last year? The one that earned me a promotion." He blinked, caught off guard. "Well, I know you're doing very well at your firm. The Henderson account. 7 figures. I told you both about it at Christmas." I turned to my mother. "Mom, what was the name of the man I was seeing 3 months ago?" "The doctor," she guessed vaguely. "He was an architect and we dated for 4 months. I brought him to Easter dinner." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "You can tell me what Adam had for lunch the day he closed his first major construction contract. You can name every boy Bella dated since high school. But the details of my life slipped through the cracks because you've never given them the same attention." My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, the beginning of recognition dawning in their expressions. "We don't mean to," my mother said softly. "We love you, Teresa." "I know you do," I acknowledged. "But love without attention and respect isn't enough. I'm not asking for special treatment, just equal consideration. And I'm not willing to be the family's unpaid secretary and driver anymore." The conversation that followed was difficult and at times painful, but also necessary. I didn't expect 3 decades of family dynamics to change overnight. But by establishing clear boundaries and expectations, I had taken the first step toward a healthier relationship. Adam was a harder case. He avoided my calls for weeks, sending Sophia as his emissary to family gatherings. When we finally did speak, his apology was grudging at best. "I didn't think you'd take a stupid joke so seriously," he grumbled over the phone. "It wasn't just the joke, Adam," I explained patiently. "It was what the joke represented. How you and the rest of the family see me as someone who serves a function rather than as an equal family member." "That's not true," he protested, though without much conviction. "It is true, and on some level you know it. I'm not asking you to change overnight. I'm just asking you to be aware of it and try to do better." Our relationship remained strained, but at least the cards were on the table now. No more pretending. No more silent acceptance of disrespect. Bella surprisingly was the quickest to adjust to the new dynamic. Perhaps being the youngest had made her more adaptable. "I never realized how much you did for everyone," she admitted during a sister's lunch a month after Hawaii. "It's like you were always this backdrop to our lives. Always there, always reliable, but never really seen." "That's exactly how it felt," I said, touched by her insight. "I'm sorry, T." She reached for my hand across the table, and I'm trying to notice more. "Like, I know your big pitch for the airline account is next week, and I've been sending good vibes your way." It was a small thing, but meaningful evidence that change was possible when everyone was willing to try. As for me, the transformation that began in Hawaii continued to unfold in my daily life. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do without offering elaborate explanations or apologies. I prioritized my own needs and interests alongside those of others rather than always putting myself last. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected while devoting so much energy to my family. And I stayed in touch with Daniel from Maui, our text messages gradually evolving into lengthy phone calls and eventually plans for him to visit Seattle during the slower tourist season. In my professional life, the changes were equally profound. I stopped volunteering for thankless tasks that took time away from my core responsibilities. I spoke up more in meetings, confident that my ideas had value. I negotiated for a raise that reflected my true worth to the company rather than accepting whatever was offered out of gratitude. 6 months after the Hawaii incident, as autumn painted Seattle in shades of gold and russet, my family gathered for my father's birthday dinner. The dynamics weren't perfect. Old habits die hard after all, but they were noticeably improved. My mother asked specific questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. My father proudly introduced me to his golf buddy as my daughter, the marketing executive. Even Adam made an effort asking my opinion about the wine selection instead of automatically taking charge. After dinner, as we stood in the restaurant parking lot saying our goodbyes, my mother pulled me aside. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she confessed, "about attention and respect. And I realized something. I think I've always paid less attention to you because you seemed so capable, so independent. You never needed us the way Adam and Bella did." "I did need you, Mom," I said softly. "Just in different ways." She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I know that now, and I'm trying to do better. That's all I'm asking," I assured her, accepting her embrace. As I drove home that night alone in my car, but not lonely, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The hurt of that Hawaiian hotel lobby hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something valuable, a catalyst for necessary change, a turning point in my life's journey. Sometimes the most important destinations aren't places on a map, but moments of clarity when we finally recognize our own worth. Sometimes the most valuable trips aren't the ones we plan meticulously, but the unexpected detours that lead us back to ourselves. And sometimes being just the driver means taking the wheel of your own life and steering it in the direction that brings you peace, joy, and the respect you've always deserved. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your worth and creating healthy boundaries. Remember, you are never just the driver in your own life story. You are the navigator, the destination, and the entire journey. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to take the wheel whenever you need to steer toward a better